Welcome to the Emily the Mystic Show. You're about to walk through a portal that leads to all things mystical, magical, spiritual, and supernatural. I'm your host, Emily. I'm a spiritual mentor, an Akashic Records practitioner and teacher, an intuition development coach, and a galactic channeler. If you're an old soul on a self-discovery and healing journey, you are in the right place. We'll be diving in deep to some of my favorite mystical topics, including manifestation, past lives, the spirit world, energy, and so much more. Get ready to embrace your inner mystic and live your most authentic life possible. The portal is now open. And the portal is now open into a topic that is perhaps a bit spooky, a bit mysterious, a bit unknown for you, especially here in the spiritual industry. And this is a topic that is a big part of my work that I dedicate a pretty significant amount of time and energy on behind closed doors when it comes to working with my long-term clients, as well as helping perhaps even you understand and recognize the signs, symptoms, and repercussions of entity attachment in your own life. And now this topic, as I was saying, is a bit taboo in the spiritual industry. It's something that not a lot of spiritual healers, coaches, mentors talk about. It's something that I find is very misunderstood, and perhaps it's because people may have some mental blocks to embarking on this topic. Perhaps it's something that people don't want to take a look at because it's not glamorous, it's not fun, it's not magical, really. It is a bit dark. This topic is a bit dark. And it really takes a lot of courage and bravery, if I do say so myself, to embark on this journey. It is a journey that is not for the faint of heart. But I know you, my dear listener, are a very courageous soul. And you know that you are ready to go into the depths of understanding yourself and your own journey here on this planet. And you're open to it all. You want to know all of it. Trust me, I'm the same way. I'm like, get me the most crazy extreme topic in the spiritual industry. I want to learn more about it. And so I hope that you find this conversation refreshing, as I hope to bring some lightness into a topic that could otherwise be perceived as being a bit shadowy, a bit dark, a bit hard to understand, and a bit uncomfortable at times. And now I will say, to kind of kickstart this episode, that to me, entity attachment in a lot of ways is the missing link within our society, within our culture, for some of the misunderstood, mysterious health challenges, mental health challenges, addictions, and low self-worth conditions that perpetuate within our culture. And because mental health is such a huge topic nowadays, and we're so often taught, the beginning of your mental health journey is to go see a talk therapist and perhaps a psychiatrist, perhaps to take a medication that's going to help you with your mental health, and then they send you on your way. And of course, that form of therapy, it's all well and good, and it has a time and a place. But often there can be things going on behind the scenes that we can't always see with our physical eyes that can be perpetuating conditions that we've had for years and years and years, maybe even decades, that we just can't seem to get a handle on. And so this conversation is going to dive into the depths of addressing a lot of that. Now, of course, this is a spiritual podcast and a very spiritual topic. So as you know, but I have to still say it, that anything that I share in this episode is not in the place of medical guidance from a doctor, from a medical practitioner, or a medical professional. But this is to give you insight into alternative therapies and alternative methods of self-care and holistic support that can really change your life. And if you've tried everything, if you've had all of the therapists, if you've tried all of the life coaching, if you've tried so many different holistic methods to help heal your inner dialogue, to help heal your low self-worth, to help heal your fears, to help alleviate your anxieties, and you're still not getting better, then this topic is for you. And this conversation is for you, because there are things going on out there in the world that many of us can't see with our physical eyes that could be making your life a lot worse. And so I hope that today's episode helps give you hope into, again, a new way of perhaps looking at your mental health and perhaps seeing that some of the challenges that you've been undergoing for perhaps even a long time is not always your fault. And that there are things out there that can be making you feel even worse. And ultimately, I want to provide you with a new way of looking at what's going on for you, a new way of healing, and getting really to the root of what's perpetuating your mental health challenges and conditions. And so with that being said, let's dive into the entity attachment conversation. So at the beginning for me of my own spiritual business journey, this particular entity journey itself started pretty early on, because when I was doing psychic readings for my clients, and at the time I was also offering mediumship readings through a local psychotherapy office here in Philadelphia, I was sensing things in my client's energy field that were not right. That there was something off with a lot of the clients that I was seeing. And I couldn't put my I couldn't put my finger on what it was, but I had a sense that there was something off or dark or not right about my client's energy. And with a little bit of research and a little bit of understanding, I started to realize that some of the people that I was seeing at the time were suffering from entity attachment. And I, at the time, as many of us in the spiritual industry do, didn't want to go further into this topic of entity attachment because it's so loaded. There's so much going on here. It's a bit spooky. It's a bit dark. And I did not want to really address it or go into it. And so what I would do is, if I started sensing something off in a client of mine's energy, I would refer them to someone else. And of course, that's a great practice to have as a spiritual practitioner, is to have amazing people, a list of amazing people, contacts that you can send people to, refer them to for things that you don't specialize in. But now that I look back at that journey and sort of how early on I was able to sense this, I now realize that there was something leading me down this path all along, that this is perhaps a part of my skill set of ancient gifts and ancient wisdom that I carry from many lives, and part of, because of my soul's own history, part of the things that I have had expertise in other lifetimes. And so I know that I am meant to really speak to and talk about this topic today and help bring light to it. And again, make it not seem so heavy, make it not seem so dark. I'm wearing today, if you're watching the YouTube video version of this, I am wearing a cute t-shirt with some skeletons on it, again, to bring light and a little bit of a laugh to this conversation, because as I was saying before, it can feel a bit shadowy. And so let's talk a little bit about what entities are and where they come from. How do I know that they exist? And some of the things that I have seen perhaps throughout the course of my journey here on planet Earth. So negative entities are low vibrational, low consciousness, parasitic spirits. They exist here on this planet just as we do, human beings, but they don't have a physical body. They are generally not human souls. Okay. They're not human souls. Sometimes I have seen what I call lost soul attachments on my clients, which are basically earthbound spirits, human souls that have gotten stuck here on this planet because of their own trauma, and they can attach to a human source. So, but the majority of entities are not human souls. They are, again, low vibrational, low consciousness, parasitic spirits. So where do they come from? Well, we live in a universe of polarity, a binary universe of light and dark. We can't have light without shadow. So if all of us here, light beings, human beings, are connected to a God, a divine source, then there must be some sort of antithesis to that. There must be some sort of, direct opposite or some sort of contrary energy to that. And that is what we call the collective shadow. So the collective shadow is formed in opposition to divine source. It's formed out of the darkness of the world. It's formed out of the dark energy that all of us perpetuate naturally as human beings. And so entities are born out of that collective shadow. Just as we human beings spawn into existence as direct extensions of divine source energy, so too do entities spawn out of direct connection to the shadow of the universe. And they basically take on a life of their own. Each of them vibrate at a specific emotional or energetic frequency, and they are not attached to or connected to divine source energy. And so because of that, they have to look to a host to feed from. So where do they go? They attach because, again, we live in a vibrational reality, like attracts like. So if an entity exists at a specific vibrational frequency, like fear, anxiety, shame, those entities will find human hosts who perpetuate those same energetic conditions internally and will usually attach at a point or a moment in that human being's life of trauma of some kind that is perpetuating that low vibrational state of consciousness. And what do the entities do? In order to maintain a feeding source, they pull on, they manipulate, they feed off of that low vibrational energy in order to maintain their quote unquote sense of life. And so for you as a human being, if you have an entity attachment, they are really tugging on that shame wound that you have. They are really tugging on that deep-seated fear that you have and perpetuating it in your own life, making it, basically blowing it out of proportion and making that shame, that fear, that anxiety that you have seem even worse to you than perhaps it could feel without the entity attachment. So entities attach at a point of trauma in your own life. And again, they feed off of the emotional, energetic frequency of basically the experience that you went through. And unfortunately for us as humans, they can stay however long they want to until your vibration changes or until you work with a healer who can help kick these things out of your field. I think it's a really big misconception in the spiritual industry that if you're doing healing work and if you're doing enough to raise your vibration, that you're just not going to have any entity attachments. Unfortunately not. Unfortunately, most of us have been through some form of trauma throughout the course of our life. And again, trauma is subjective. So it's really, trauma really exists in the eye of the beholder. And so depending on your own life, things for you that seemed really big or really challenging at the time, especially during the course of your childhood, can create a deep wound within your soul, a deep wound within your own shadow that these beings can attach to. And because they are not connected to source energy, they do not and are not connected to the law of free will. So entities do not have to follow the law of free will. And honestly, they don't care about the law of free will. Again, they're low consciousness, low vibrational spirits. So they operate under their own choices, their own decisions, their own, whatever their own consciousness can allow them to do in order to be able to exist. So they don't have the capacity to feel love. They don't have the capacity to feel high vibrational energies. They are parasitic in nature. So they exist, right? And because of the way of the human spirit, the way of human nature, we are both light and dark. We are both light and shadow. We are going to have things that happen throughout the course of our life that can create space for an entity attachment. Now, I'm not saying this to scare you, but I do tend to find that most of us have gone throughout our life with some form of attachment. Attachments can come and go. We can absolutely shake them and get rid of them through doing deep healing work, through addressing our traumas, through healing from adversity, through healing from things that we faced throughout the course of our life. Absolutely, we can. And that can be enough to shake an attachment. But usually we have 1, 2, 3, maybe even more, especially if we've been through a lot of trauma throughout the course of our life, that can tend to stay with us because they like to perpetuate the self-sabotaging behaviors, the mental health conditions, the depression, the challenges, the anxieties that we go through because we're so used to feeling those energies and emotions. We don't know life without them. We don't know what life feels like without them. And so entities weaponize that and use that against us. They're very psychic. They know things about us, unfortunately. Yes, they are low consciousness, low vibration. They don't have the capacity to feel love, but they know how to push your buttons. They know how to take advantage of you. They know what causes fear within you. They know what can create anxiety, and they will do what they can to attach to that and perpetuate that. Again, this conversation is not to scare you, but it is here to open your eyes into the possibility that this can exist. And if you feel like this is creating enough turmoil in your own life, to give you a place where you can go to find help by seeking a session with me or another person who is an expert at entity clearing in order to get results, in order to let these things go, and in order to be able to move forward in your own life. So let's talk a little bit about some of the signs and symptoms of entity interference so that you can start to become aware of if this is something that may be going on for you in your own life. So I really want you to pay attention to your body and how you're feeling as you hear some of these signs and symptoms, because you may really start to feel something. And by the way, if this conversation for you is very triggering in nature and you're feeling irritated or on edge right now as you listen to this episode, that is a very big indicator that there's probably something in your field that doesn't want you to hear this episode. So with that being said, let's talk about some of the signs and symptoms of entity interference. So number 1 is any form of psychological distress, any form of extreme mental health condition. So anxiety, depression, panic attacks, dread, any feeling of melancholy or feeling like something is off. If you just have a sense that something is wrong, perhaps you have heavy emotions that you haven't been able to shake. I would say that entities, perhaps you've had sort of a low-grade anxiety disorder or a low-grade depression that's sort of perpetuated in the background of your life for a long time. When it's time to release entities, sometimes those symptoms can actually really ramp themselves up. And if your symptoms maybe throughout the course of your life have been at, let's say, a 4 out of 10, they're enough to create distress, but not enough to, cause you to really seek an extreme form of treatment. But then all of a sudden, you start to notice that your symptoms ramp up. Perhaps you can't leave your house, or Perhaps you've been left in a really deep state of depression or anxiety for a long time and you can't seem to shake it. It may be because the entity knows that you are getting to a point in your own journey where you may start to become aware of it, and it will do whatever it can to pull as much from you as it possibly can until it is time for that mofo to get out of your field. So unfortunately, you may find that your symptoms get worse before they get better. And that's totally normal because, again, they're trying to really ramp things up for you so that you can start to eventually get rid of them. Entities can create extremely intrusive thoughts. So if you've ever had the experience of moving around your house, perhaps you're doing things around the house, you're doing housework, you're doing laundry, and you have a bad thought that comes into your head and it says something like, you're ugly, or I hate you, or you're a bad person, and you don't know where that's coming from, or you've had some sort of negative self-talk throughout the course of your life, and there's always that negative voice in the back of your mind that's saying hurtful things to you, that's an entity. That's not you. I know we're taught that negative self-talk often comes from us, but a lot of the time it doesn't. A lot of the time it does come from these malevolent sources. Entities can also create a sense of paranoia, a feeling of being watched, a feeling like something is following you, or a feeling of something not having your best interests at heart, kind of just being there. Entities can also be attached. They attach to humans, but they can also be attached to a physical location or a home. So you may have an entity in your house and entities attached to homes if there were times of challenge or negative experiences or traumas that happened in that house, whether from you or from the people who lived there before you. Entities can also stay attached to homes because of that. And you may notice that if there is an entity attached to your house, you may find yourself having and experiencing weird mental health symptoms from being at home, from being in your house. You may feel, again, like something's watching you, or like something wants to mess with you, or like something, you just can't shake this weird sense of something being there that you can't explain. Entities typically create unexplainable symptoms that doctors don't know how to deal with, that mental health practitioners don't know how to deal with, especially if you have panic attacks that come from nowhere and you have no idea what drives them. There's no sort of trigger point that creates them. That can definitely be perpetuated by an entity source. Another example is any sort of just sense of heaviness or dread that you can't shake, this feeling of something being off. And maybe you felt that way for months at a time. And you feel like this sense of wanting to get your life back or wanting to feel like yourself again, that is very likely being perpetuated by an entity. Entities create mood swings. They create an agitation in your energy field. So if you ever go throughout the course of your day with sort of this extreme sense of shifting in the way that you feel, and you can't account for it, it's not due to external circumstances, or perhaps you get really agitated by even specific things like having to wait in line or being behind the wheel of a car or having a specific, phone calls come through from specific people that really agitate you. That can also be an indicator of an entity who knows that you are bothered by those situations because of trauma that you've had in the past. They want to weaponize that and they want to create even more disturbance basically in your energy field so that they can feed off of it. Entities also create unexplained physical symptoms. So if you have had chronic pain or chronic health conditions that just don't seem to get better ever, and you have any sort of sense of deep pain or discomfort in the body that doctors can't explain, it's likely that there's an entity causing that. And again, perpetuating a trauma that you've had at some point in your life that is creating physical symptoms. Physical pain is always energetic at its root cause. So depending on what you've been through throughout the course of your life, those traumas can get stored in the body and entities can weaponize them and make you feel even worse. Entities can also perpetuate unexplainable illnesses or body aches, headaches, and also too, if you have struggled with any sort of chronic fatigue throughout the course of your life, and you just can't seem to get an answer as to why you're tired all of the time. You don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to do things. You don't have any motivation to get anything done. It's likely that there is an entity behind the scenes perpetuating that. Same with being disconnected from your body. Entities don't want you to be in the body because when you're in your body, you are powerful. You are in the seat of your power when you're fully dropped into your body. So they perpetuate feelings of dissociation and disconnection with the body. They would prefer that you be totally disconnected from yourself and totally numbed out. So here's the thing. Entities can also perpetuate addictions. Anything that keeps you out of the body, anything that keeps you numbed or in a state of self-sabotage where you're perpetuating some sort of behavior that makes you feel good in the moment, but that is a way to escape from some sort of trauma or a trapped emotional experience that you've been through in the past. Entities love taking advantage of that and will continue to push those behaviors within you. If you've lost motivation and interest in your day-to-day life, if you have any sort of self-sabotaging behaviors, maybe you isolate yourself or you push other people away from you in order to protect yourself, you sort of keep yourself locked up a bit, or any goal that you've tried to achieve, there's been a part of you that's been so doubtful of yourself and you just can't seem to put one foot in front of the other in order to achieve that goal. It's likely that there's an entity behind the scenes who, again, is perpetuating that behavior. They exist kind of like literally a part of our physical shadow. If you go stand in the sun, you can see your shadow, right? Entities basically hang out in our energy field in that way. And they pull, again, on all of these things, that behaviors that would drive us nuts. And they pull on them, they feed off of them, they make us feel worse. We have negative self-talk going all of the time. We have unexplainable challenges with our mental health, with feeling low and depressed about life, perhaps even with eating behaviors and patterns. They can perpetuate eating disorders or any other sort of disordered pattern or behavior. They love that. They will perpetuate that forever, ever, ever until we get rid of them. Entities can also create sleep disturbances. So if you have ever had nightmares throughout your life, if you have ever had sleep paralysis or pure panic, pure dread in the middle of the night, it's likely coming from an entity attachment. They love to feed on us during the night. And so, especially if you have reoccurring nightmares, reoccurring night terrors, screaming, shouting, waking up in the middle of the night, sleepwalking, or any other unexplained sleep behaviors, insomnia, fear of falling asleep, fear of staying asleep, all of that can be perpetuated by entity activity. So now that you know some of the signs and symptoms of entity attachment, I want to talk a little bit about my own story with entity attachment and how this created such a deep portal of healing for me and my own journey in my own life. So rewinding the clock back to the fall of 2022, I started experiencing some of the symptoms that I have been sharing with you today. Now, I have struggled with my mental health in the past. I talked a bit about that in episode 1 of this podcast, where I was dealing with a lot of anxiety at my old job and panic and waking up in the middle of the night, not being able to sleep, having a ton of sleep disturbances. And all of that really started to actually get worse in the fall of 2022. And what drove that experience of it getting worse was that I had attended a concert the weekend ahead of my symptoms getting worse for me. This concert happened to take place at a haunted site. Now, I love live music. A lot of you guys know I am a huge music festival person. I go to a lot of music festivals and concerts. So I am not one to turn down a cool experience or to turn down tickets to a concert. And I still, to this day, go to a lot of concerts, go to a lot of festivals. But at this time, in the fall of 2022, I went to this concert at this haunted site. I was not at the time in my practice using a lot of protective energy or doing a lot of clearing on work on myself. And I didn't really, again, I was aware of entity attachment at that time. I was referring other people to entity clears to have their own entities taken care of, but it wasn't something for me at the time that I wanted to deal with. Well, lo and behold, I went to this concert and I walked into the trap of getting an entity attachment. That night, my partner claims that my behavior changed very rapidly throughout the course of the night, that I became aggressive, that I started saying things that were totally out of character for me, that I just started acting super weird, which is totally out of the norm for me. And I remember during the course of that night, I just felt off. I felt agitated. I felt irritable and I felt angry and I could not explain why. I was definitely sensing a lot of energy at this place where the concert was happening. But I, again, didn't really want to tune into it. I'm off the clock. I'm not, being a spiritual healer during the hours of me being at this concert. So it wasn't really something I wanted to take a look at or deal with at the time. But then, of course, in the days after that concert that I went to, I started feeling worse and worse and worse. I kid you not. I was walking down the street feeling kind of low about myself, just kind of in this dark energy. And I heard a voice in my head. I have clear audience, so I can hear spirits in my head. I heard a voice tell me in those moments, Emily, you are a sinner. And it was so creepy. I was like, what? I'm a sinner? I would never say that to myself ever, ever, ever. I have a background. I was raised in the Catholic Church, but I'm not going around telling myself that I'm a sinner or even thinking about that on a daily basis. Absolutely not. No way. And this creepy voice in my head, and I kept hearing weird things like that in the days and weeks following that concert. I knew something was off. I knew something was wrong with me, but I didn't know what it was and I didn't know what was going on. So lo and behold, I found, who is now a dear friend of mine, an entity clearing expert. Her name is Kristen. She is absolutely incredible. I will leave her information below in the show notes so that you can take a look and see what she has going on in her world. She is an expert in entity clearing. And so I reached out to her. I scheduled a session with her. She was like, it sounds like you got an entity. I was so at the time just like, I don't want to deal with this. I'm not interested in this side of the spiritual space. But at the same time, my symptoms were so bad and I started feeling worse and worse and worse. I couldn't sleep at night. I was also having these awful intruder nightmares where I felt like someone was watching me in the middle of the night through a window in my bedroom. So I had all these crazy symptoms and I was like, Kristen, please help. So Kristen did an entity clearing with me, and lo and behold, I found that an entity that was a low vibrational, low consciousness spirit who had followed me to the concert, had attached because of some things going on in my energy field that I hadn't dealt with yet, some traumas, some challenges that I had been through that I hadn't done healing around yet, had attached because of the place where I was physically. I was at this really low vibrational historical site where it was on a battlefield. So there was a lot of heavy energy there. At the time, I was not, again, using spiritual protection. I was basically kind of going in blind, the psychic person going in blind into this sort of creepy concert venue. And of course, with things in my own field that I hadn't healed, I walked out with this entity who happened to have been a malevolent spirit and made me realize that I still had a lot of unhealed trauma around my religious upbringing and being told and taught throughout the course of my childhood that I was a sinner and that I naturally had the sinful quality about me and that I was a bad person. And so going to a concert, which is a pretty hedonistic thing to do, going to this party, having a good time, and still having that belief system that I'm a bad person or I'm a sinner for doing and participating in activities like that was what led to me getting the entity attachment. And I am so glad that it happened. And I am so glad that this whole crazy experience that I went through happened because it opened up a whole new portal of healing for me. It made me address some of the religious trauma and challenges that I have been throughout the course of my life. And it made me address some of the belief systems that I had been told and taught by other people that just didn't resonate with me anymore. And getting rid of the entity, I kid you not, I felt immediately better. The next day I woke up and I was like, oh my God, I feel like myself again. I had a great night of sleep finally after days and weeks of these nightmares that I had been having. I finally had a good night of sleep. I woke up the next day after the entity clearing with Kristen, and I felt like a whole new person. It was unbelievable. And from that moment forward, I was like, this modality is life-changing. And for me, that entity that I am sharing with you that I dealt with honestly was not that extreme in terms of the spectrum of entities that exist out there. I also, during the course of my session with Kristen, we got into it and discovered that I had other entities that had been with me since childhood from other experiences that I had witnessed, that I had been through, that were in my field. So I had, I think, 6 or maybe even 7 entities that I dealt with Kristen during that first initial session with her. And so letting go of those years and years of trauma from my field, oh my God, opened up a whole new world of self-discovery for me and a whole new world of feeling like myself. Again, it was absolutely wild because entities feed off of our energy and they're parasitic in nature. They can really create a big energy drain. They can make us feel exhausted. They can make us feel tired. And so if you've had these things in your field forever and ever, getting rid of them, you feel like you get your life force back. You feel like you get your energy back. All of a sudden, the self-doubt, the negative self-talk, the internal negative dialogue goes away, and you start to get clarity around your next steps. And you don't feel so blocked towards going for your goals or taking the steps that you need to take in order to perhaps create success in some area of your life. I know for me, this entity really was creating this feeling of isolation and me wanting to stay inside my house, me not wanting to talk to anyone or participate in anything. And after I cleared the entity, I saw a huge uptick in my social media following. I saw a huge uptick in my own energy and my own ability to do things like this, get on camera, talk about myself, share my story. And that over the years, so it's been a little over a year and a half since that clearing, I have really started to gain even more success and traction in my business. And I definitely attribute a lot of that to both the Akashic Records and to doing entity work. Because if I hadn't cleared the low vibrational stuff for my field, it would still continue to pull me back. Entities create a bit of a rubber band effect. We think that we are getting further in life, but the moment that we take a step outside of our comfort zone, we feel like we get snapped back into our old place of being, into our own old state of being, like we can't move forward. So I want to talk a little bit now about the process of doing an entity clearing. If you're listening to all of this and you're like, oh my God, I need this, Emily, I need you, I need help with this. and you're wanting to go down the path of having a clearing, I got you. I do entity clearings. I will leave the link below in the show notes. And I do want to talk a little bit about what that process looks like. So after having that session with Kristen, I went through a couple of Kristen's offerings that she has specifically around entity release work. And really, those offerings, again, continue to change my life. I kept seeing myself feel better and better and better. My mental health stuff started really going away. My sleep started getting better and better and better. I stopped having any nightmares. I started feeling like my internal dialogue was getting more and more and more positive with time. And I knew that if I am being so deeply affected by this, and this is helping me so much, that I have to start doing this work for other people. So I started doing entity clearings behind closed doors in my one-on-one mentorship containers, as well as for some of my seasoned clients who have worked with me for a long time. I started seeing huge success in their own results and how they were feeling. Now, whenever I do, or whenever I have a new one-on-one client that I start working with, we always have to do an entity clearing right off the bat. We usually do it during session 2 or 3 because I know that the majority of us have something in our fields that we need to clear. And it makes such a huge difference in how we approach the world and how we feel on a day-to-day basis. So I always make sure that I include that work in my one-on-one client sessions. Typically, clients know what they're signing up for when they come to a session with me, but there have been a few times when there has been something so obvious in my client's field that I've had to tell them, like, hey, I'm being shown that it's a better use of our time and energy today that we go down this path. We do this entity clearing. I know it's going to make you feel a lot better. And so we're going to spend our time and energy over here. And so sometimes that will happen for me when I'm doing a session with a client, and I make sure I let them know what I'm sensing in their field, because I see them in my mind's eye and I can also sense the frequency of them. So that's how I tend to know when they're in my client's energy. So when I do an entity clearing with a client, I have them get really relaxed, whether either they're sitting or lying down. We go into the meditative state together. So here's the thing. With the type of entity clearing that I do, you are an active participant in the session. What does that mean? That means that you are actively doing the clearing work with me. Even if you've never had any experience before with doing energy clearings on yourself, that's okay. I guide you through the whole process. And the reason being is because it is so much more powerful when you can get into the depths of what has caused the entity attachment in the first place, why it's there, how it's affecting you, and you are consciously saying, get out of my field. I don't want you here. It is so much more powerful than if I were to just pluck things off of you. If I were to pluck things off of you, guess what? We're not getting to the root of your trauma. And if we're not getting to the root of your trauma, then guess what? You're going to continue to have open wounds. And guess what? Those open wounds can unfortunately attract future things to them. And I don't want that to happen to you. So I want to make the best use of your time. I want to make sure we're getting rid of things at the root. And so you get to be an active participant in the process. We lead you into a really deep meditative state so we can tap into your subconscious mind, who already holds all of the answers as to who these beings are, why they're in your field. And we have a conversation with them. We get to know what kind of entity they are. And that is a whole conversation we didn't even get into today, or the different types of entity attachment. But we get to know who they are, what they want from you, what they are perpetuating in your energy field, how they are creating different challenges in your life, how they're impacting you, all of those things. And we figure out what caused them to attach. And then we do some healing around that so that when you leave the session, you feel like you've really addressed the issues that were presented in the first place that have created the attachment. So we dive into all of those different things. We make sure that you get a full, well-rounded healing. We make sure that we just clear as many things as we possibly can during the 1.5-hour session together. And then you leave feeling perhaps a little tired, because the process itself can be tiring. But the next day, you're going to wake up feeling a lot lighter and a lot brighter. So it's a really cool journey, and it really causes you to use your intuitive gifts. It kind of forces you to open up your intuition during the session itself, which is really fun and really interesting because I'm right there with you during the session. So I'm sensing and experiencing the same things that you are. And that really creates such a profound co-creative healing process between the two of us. And then we get rid of them. We work with some different archangels and your higher self to get them out of your field for good. And then you can move on with your life and you can get your life back. And ultimately, that's always my goal for you, is to feel like yourself and also to feel like a lighter and brighter version of you. So again, this work is so, so, so powerful. And like I was saying before, it's not for the faint of heart, but if you're willing to look at this, and if you're willing to see what's there, and if you're willing to take a look and see what's in your shadow, that is when you're really going to see the magic happen. Because when you become aware of what's going on in your own energy field, you get to know yourself so much better. You have so much more love and self-compassion for yourself. And you get to clear these things once and for all so that they are no longer dragging you down and making you feel worse and worse and worse. Again, you get to feel lighter and brighter. And who doesn't want that? So this conversation, this topic, it's worth taking a look at. It's worth the question of, could there possibly be something here that is making me feel worse, that is perpetuating my symptoms? And going into, okay, if there is something here, can I be open to the fact that there may be a part of me that needs a really deep level of healing? And can I be open to what that could look like on the other side? What if I do heal from that trauma? What if I do let go of that old energy that's been holding me back for such a long time? What could that mean for me? And I want to speak briefly into some things that you can do to protect yourself from new attachments. So this is not going to protect you from things that are already going on in your energy field, but I know people are going to reach out and ask me, well, what do I do to protect myself? What do I do to protect myself? So this is what I would do if I were going back to that concert, right, that caused my own entity attachment. And also, this is just what I do in my day-to-day life in order to keep myself safe. So every single morning when I wake up, I call in what I call a white force field shield of energy. This to me is a stronger form of protection than your classic white light bubble. It is or a golden bubble of light. It is a really strong, dense force field of energy. A force field keeps things out of your system. A force field also makes sure that nothing that you don't want to enter or receive access to you can get in. So what I do is I say out loud, Spirit Guide team, please call in a white force field shield of light around me throughout the course of my day today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then I imagine that around me, 6 feet out on all sides, there is this massive force field of white light. Again, it is thick. There is nothing penetrating that barrier that I create around me. And again, nothing else can get in. So that's what I speak into existence every single day, no matter what day of the week it is. I always make sure to have my white force field shield of energy up around me at all times. I also really like a type of incense that is called copal resin incense. That's spelled COPAL, copal resin. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at a lot of spiritual shops. It is a type of incense that you will need to burn on an incense holder with a charcoal disc. Entities hate copal. It is a really strong scent. It has a really strong fragrance to it. It is a lot stronger than sage or Palo Santo. So I prefer that to, again, saging using Palo Santo. I have a little cauldron incense holder that I use to burn the copal resin. Entities hate that. So I have that around my space whenever I am doing entity clearings. And again, I always make sure to have that protection up around me at all times to make sure that nothing can penetrate my field. And then the copal resin incense is just an extra additive, an extra add-on. I also really recommend that there's an incredible book that you check out on entity release by a woman named R.H. Stavis. She is an incredible entity healer herself. And the book is called Sister of Darkness. It's an absolutely incredible resource on entity release that I could not put down when I read this book. I read it so fast in like 24 hours. You can get it on Amazon. I will leave the link for that below in the show notes as well. And that also has a lot of really helpful energy clearing and protective tips from Rachel herself. She calls herself a celebrity exorcist. And so I really encourage you to check out her work as well, because I know she's influenced me. She's influenced Kristen, again, another incredible entity healer, and you do not want to miss out on her book. And so that's what I want to leave you with from this episode is, do I have the courage to dive into the depths of my subconscious, the depths of who I am, the depths of my auric field, and know that I will emerge a much more courageous, a much more brave, a much lighter and brighter version of me. So if all of that sounds good to you and you're like, sign me up for a clearing, I will leave the link below for that. I also have an entity workshop that I taught in my membership that was recorded with a self-clearing that you can do on your own time. So I will leave the link below to join my membership. I will say, though, that self-clearing tends to open up a bit of a can of worms. And you're like, yes, I can do this. I can do this myself. I don't need Emily. And then you're like, oh my God, there's a lot here for me to do. And then that's likely when you're going to want to schedule a session with me. But still, the entity workshop, I go more deeply into depth about the different types of entity attachment. I cover this topic in so much more detail than what I was able to have time to cover today during this episode. So I definitely want you to check that out, because it may help you see and understand this topic even more deeply, especially if it fascinates you. So that's to join my membership, get the recording for the entity workshop. I will leave the link below for that as well in the show notes. And finally, if you're like, yes, I want to do the entity work, but Emily, I'm also ready to heal on all levels and to discover myself more deeply at a soul level, I would love to invite you into a one-on-one mentorship experience with me, because we do this entity work as a part of my mentorship package, as well as, of course, diving into who you are at a galactic level, diving into who you are at a past life level, diving into who you are and what you were meant to do here on this planet. So if you want to dive into more of those things in more depth one-on-one with me, I will leave the link for that below in the show notes as well. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay safe out there, have courage, and know that you are stronger than anything out there that may want to try to get to you. I love you so much, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now. The portal is now closed. Thank you so much for listening. I invite you to join our community of mystics and spiritual seekers in my Emily the Mystic membership for more content, support, and fun just like this episode. You can check that out on my website, emilythemystic.com/membership. Don't forget to send this podcast episode to a friend who needs to hear it, rate the show wherever you listen to your podcasts, and follow along on my Instagram and YouTube at Emily the Mystic. Don't worry, the portal will open again soon. See you then.